The second Nicki Minaj stepped out alongside Donald Trump, hold up, the culture felt that shock immediately, because that visual spoke way louder than any caption or tweet ever could. Optics matter, period. And this particular optic landed heavy.
2% of the jobs. Companies 5 to 500 employees, and all we care about is policy.
I am probably the president's #1 fan. And that's not going to change.
What looked like a power move at first quickly turned into a full-blown stress test for credibility, alignment, and self-awareness. In street terms, listen, this was not a quiet toe dip into politics. This was a loud walk into a room that does not respond with grace or mercy. The audience didn't need explanations or think pieces to react. The image said everything on its own. And when celebrity confidence collides with political indifference, the impact is harsh, and the internet wastes zero time deciding how it feels about it.
You need to grow the up with your irresponsible act. That's right. It's a crazy time. I'm not the only black man with a bunch of mugshots. Show another one.
What you see, dude?
The walkout read like pure confidence. Confidence invites scrutiny. Scrutiny invites commentary. And that commentary found the perfect messenger in Katt Williams, whose timing has always been precise. Katt didn't yell, didn't threaten, didn't even debate the politics. He joked, and jokes travel way farther than arguments ever will. The streets already know this rule. Comedy is the sharpest weapon because it cuts while everybody's laughing. By turning that image into a punchline, Katt completely reset the moment. What could have been sold as access suddenly felt like confusion, and what could have been framed as influence started looking a lot like being used for optics.
For young men, you have amazing role models like our handsome, dashing president.
That shift mattered, for real. Once the crowd starts laughing at a moment, it immediately loses its power. Power requires seriousness to survive. Laughter pulls the seriousness straight out of the air. Katt's humor wasn't aimed at talent or success at all. It was aimed at assumption. Hold up, that's the key. The assumption that proximity automatically equals power. The assumption that online applause somehow converts into real respect inside political spaces. And the assumption that walking next to a powerful figure means you're walking with leverage. The streets watched those assumptions crack in real time.
I want to know, now I know that this is the busiest man in show business, okay? I know that he's rich, and I know that, he's the funniest man in showbiz. Can y'all hit up Katt Williams and ask him what would be his price to hi Haiti, how are you? To be a part of the Pink Friday 2. Yeah. But I would like to know if on one of his off days, if I could slide him a little bag, a big bag, and then have him come out.
What really made the roast sting was how effortless and calm it came off. Calm jokes land way harder than angry ones. Angry jokes fade fast. Calm jokes stay with you. The delivery made it clear this wasn't personal beef. It was simply an observation. And observations stick because they invite people to agree without feeling pushed. The crowd nodded, laughed, and passed it along. That's exactly how narratives get cemented.
About, Nicki Minaj insisted she was not going to jump on the Trump bandwagon in 2020. Now she's singing the president's praises as a full-throated MAGA supporter. So what happened?
I have the utmost respect and admiration for our president.
The rapper was effusive in her praise for President Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance during an interview with Erica Kirk at Turning Point's America Fest.
He's given so many people hope that there's a chance to beat the bad guys.
The reaction started to snowball because that image was already controversial before the joke even touched down. Fans were divided, timelines were on fire, and the silence from industry peers spoke louder than words. Then the roast dropped, and suddenly gave people the language they'd been missing for their discomfort. Comedy doesn't create discomfort, it names it. And once it's named, that discomfort spreads fast. This was never about canceling anybody. It was about reframing a moment that felt misplayed. In the streets, miscalculation hits harder than opposition because it tells people you didn't read the room, and reading the room is survival. Katt read the room quicker than the headline cycle could catch up. He understood that political spaces don't reward celebrity loyalty the same way fan spaces do. They take the picture and keep it moving. By the end of the day, that image wasn't standing on its own anymore. It was tied to a joke, and jokes don't loosen their grip. Screenshots travel, clips loop, captions basically write themselves. That's how an image turns into a meme. And once it's a meme, it's bigger than whatever the original intention was. This wasn't about ideology winning or losing. It was about optics losing control. And when optics slip, the streets decide how the story gets told.
Trump said this week, he spoke to the president of Puerto Rico and the president of the Virgin Islands.
Sir, you are the president of Puerto Rico, and you are also the president of the Virgin Islands. So the question is, who done?
As Katt's line spread, the culture unpacked why the roast felt so brutal without ever sounding mean, and the answer was simple: truth wrapped in humor. Comedy hits hardest when it reflects what people already feel but haven't said out loud yet. That walkout sparked confusion for a lot of folks, not because of political beliefs, but because of expectations. Expectations create vulnerability, and when those expectations don't get met, embarrassment shows up fast. Katt didn't create the embarrassment. Listen, he exposed it. The streets peeped how the joke wasn't chasing politics, it was chasing positioning, and positioning is the real currency of power. You're either positioned to be heard or positioned to be used. The roast hinted at the second one, and that hint landed heavy because the silence from the political side handled the rest. Silence is confirmation in public spaces, and when you expect acknowledgement but get nothing back, that absence speaks louder than words.
The world looked very different 15 years ago when Minaj used Trump, then a private citizen and reality TV star, as an example of misogyny against women in the entertainment industry.
But Donald Trump, he gets to hang out with young and have 50 different wives and just be cool.
Minaj, who was born Onika Tanya Mirage in Trinidad and Tobago in December 1982, has been open about coming to the United States as an undocumented child. In an emotional social media post in 2018, she called out the separation of families at the border during Trump's first administration, saying, quote, "This is so scary to me. Please stop this." Things seemed to shift for Minaj during the COVID-19 pandemic. Anti-vaxxers flocked to her social media when in September 2021, she posted claiming that an unnamed friend of her cousin had, quote, became impotent after getting a COVID-19 shot. Medical experts have refuted those claims regarding the vaccine. By this year, she was reposting videos from the White House on TikTok, including one that used her Va Va Voom song as a soundtrack and touted Trump's anti-trans and anti-immigration policies. All of this led up to her appearance at Turning Point USA's America Fest.
The world looked very different about 15 years ago when Minaj referenced Trump, back then just a private citizen and reality TV personality, as an example of misogyny in the entertainment industry. She even pointed out how Donald Trump could move freely, date younger women, cycle through marriages, and still be treated as untouchable. Minaj, born Onika Tanya Mirage in Trinidad and Tobago in December 1982, has openly spoken about coming to the United States as an undocumented child. In a deeply emotional social media post back in 2018, she called out the separation of families at the border during Trump's first administration, saying, quote, "This is so scary to me." She ended that plea with a clear message: please stop this. Things began to noticeably shift for Minaj during the COVID pandemic. Anti-vax communities flooded her social media after a September 2021 post where she claimed an unnamed friend of her cousin had, quote, become impotent after receiving a COVID-19 vaccine. Medical professionals quickly pushed back and refuted those claims about the vaccine. By this year, she was reposting White House videos on TikTok, including one that used her Va Va Voom song while promoting Trump's anti-trans and anti-immigration policies. All of that momentum eventually led to her appearance at Turning Point USA's America Fest. This entire moment also exposed how celebrity bubbles can warp reality. Inside that bubble, likes start to feel like leverage. Outside that bubble, leverage requires something very different. The jump from bubble to boardroom is rough, and when you stumble, the fall is loud. Katt's humor made that transition visible without forcing anything. He didn't push, he pointed. Fans started debating whether the roast went too far. That debate missed the entire point. The joke didn't escalate the moment, it clarified it, and clarification removes excuses. Once things were clarified, the image shifted from bold to awkward. Awkward moments don't bounce back quickly because they make people uncomfortable, and discomfort keeps content alive. The streets respect confidence, but they respect awareness even more. Awareness means knowing exactly where you stand in every room you walk into. The roast suggested a gap in that awareness, and the internet fills gaps fast. What really amplified everything was timing. That walkout happened during a period of heightened sensitivity. People were already watching moves closely. The roast landed in a ready audience, and ready audiences turn moments into movements. This wasn't a pile-on, it was a pivot. The narrative pivoted from statement to spectacle, and spectacle drains authority. Authority needs gravity. Gravity disappeared the second laughter took over. Katt's role mattered because he didn't sound emotionally invested. Detachment gives jokes credibility. If you sound invested, people debate your motive. If you sound detached, people debate the truth. The crowd chose truth. The reaction also showed how fast public sympathy can evaporate when a move feels misread. Sympathy needs clarity. Confusion kills it. The roast turned that confusion into a clean takeaway, and takeaways spread. This wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning of a new lens, and once the lens changes, every future move gets viewed differently. That's the real damage of a viral roast. It doesn't close a chapter, it changes how the next one gets read. The streets didn't crown winners, they acknowledged missteps, and acknowledgement is colder than criticism. Cold moments linger. As the clip kept looping, the conversation shifting from shock to lesson, because this situation exposed a hard truth about fame crossing lanes into power. Fame brings attention. Power demands usefulness. When attention pretends to be useful, the correction comes fast. The roast made that correction feel obvious. The culture started connecting dots to past moments where celebrities stepped into political spaces expecting mutual respect and walked out with nothing. History keeps repeating itself because the lessons keep getting ignored.
The streets remember patterns, and Katt's humor tapped straight into that memory, refreshing it for a whole new generation. Another reason this hit so hard was how carefully the roast avoided touching artistry. Attacking artistry triggers defense. Attacking assumptions triggers agreement. The joke basically said, "You thought this meant more than it actually did." And that's devastating, because it reframes intention as miscalculation. The internet thrives on misjudgment because it feels human. Perfectly executed plans don't go viral, slips do. The walkout paired with the roast created a clean arc. Bold move, cold response, sharp joke. Arcs travel. This moment also showed how fast control disappears once the story stops belonging to you. Once the roast defined the image, explanations showed up too late. Explanations never beat jokes. Jokes are shorter, easier to repeat, and emotionally sticky. The streets noticed how industry voices moved cautiously. Caution isn't betrayal, it's calculation. The calculation signals that the move complicated alliances. Complication is expensive in spaces built on alignment. What followed wasn't outrage fatigue, it was curiosity. Curiosity lasts longer. People replayed the clip not to hate, but to understand how confidence turned into such a clean punchline. Understanding keeps content alive.
This was never about right or wrong, it was about reading or misreading. The room was misread, and misreads get corrected in public. The roast also reinforced how comedy works as cultural enforcement. When rules get bent, comedy snaps them back, not with force, but with laughter. Laughter enforces norms quietly. The lasting impact here wasn't humiliation, it was awareness. Awareness that celebrity clout doesn't equal political leverage. Awareness that silence from power speaks louder than applause from fans. Awareness that optics decides narratives before intentions ever get explained. The streets log these lessons. They don't shout them, they reference them later. And this moment will get referenced anytime someone mistakes proximity for power. That's why it stuck, not because it was loud, but because it was clean. When the dust finally settled, the takeaway wasn't chaos, it was calibration. The culture recalibrated how it views celebrity walkouts, political proximity, and the cost of misreading rooms. The roast didn't erase careers or shut conversations down. It adjusted expectations, and adjusted expectations change behavior. This moment will live on as an example, not a verdict. Examples teach without yelling. They guide quietly. The streets prefer examples because they feel earned. The laughter faded, but the reference stayed, and references shape future reactions. The next time a celebrity steps into a political space with confidence, people will remember this arc. Memory is culture's long game. What made this moment powerful is that nobody had to pile on. The roast did enough, and the silence did the rest.
Together, they ended up writing a story about limits. Limits of fame, limits of access, limits of assumption. The streets weren't asking for apologies or explanations. They were watching how the moment got handled after the cameras stopped flashing. Handling the aftermath is way harder than surviving the headline. Headlines fade, aftermath lingers. This was never about humiliation for entertainment. It was about exposing how power rooms actually function. Power rooms don't clap, they calculate, and calculation doesn't care about loyalty offered from the outside looking in. The biggest lesson here is simple and timeless. Know the room before you step inside it. Know who really holds the leverage. Know exactly what you're trading for that photo. Comedy just delivered that memo faster than any long-form think piece ever could. As the cycle moved forward, the culture didn't stay angry, it stayed aware. Awareness outlives outrage. That's why this moment matters. Not because it was brutal, but because it was instructive. And instruction is how culture protects itself from repeating the same mistake. If you stayed locked in through this entire breakdown, make sure you like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next story the streets won't stop talking about.